It's about pre-crime. It's about predicting stuff before it happens. And that's what I think a lot of people miss about Palantir, because a lot of people say about mass surveillance, well, I have nothing to hide. But it's not about if you're doing something wrong now or not. It's about an algorithm thinking if you will do something wrong in the future.
I think I would definitely be on that algorithm. I think you would be as well.
I would argue that neoconservatives have very successfully rebranded. And I think Peter Thiel is a very important example of that. So Peter Thiel, as an example, Palantir has been in the news, right? He's a co-founder of that. So how was Palantir created? Well, there was this company that was being run, or not company, sorry. It was a government program after 9/11 called Total Information Awareness. It was housed within the Pentagon's DARPA office. And the man they chose to put in charge of that was John Poindexter, who was the highest ranking member of the Reagan administration to be indicted for his role in Iran-Contra, which again, the continuity of government stuff is relevant here. So eventually, it launches and whatever, but people are outraged by it because as they rightly pointed out, it would eliminate constitutional protections of Americans' rights, specifically the right to privacy, among other things. It was a huge surveillance dragnet. And its goal wasn't just to, surveil everything. It was to predict crime before it happens, predict terror attacks before it happens. I mean, it's like Minority Report. Yeah. Was basically the end goal of it. And so after all the pushback, they changed the name to Terrorist Information Awareness and try and rebrand. Oh, it's not total. We are still going to surveil innocent Americans, but we're focusing on the terrorists. They did all this stuff to try and rebrand it, but Congress defunded it. But hidden in that bill, Congress allowed aspects of it to continue. And essentially, I argue in my work on Palantir that an effort was made to privatize large aspects of TIA as Palantir. Because when Alex Karp and Peter Thiel were setting it up, they went to John Poindexter through this guy named Richard Pearl, who was a long-standing neocon actor with very extensive ties also to the state of Israel. He was caught in the 70s giving classified information to Israel's embassy and should have gone to jail and somehow did not, and had a lot of ties also to Netanyahu's first government. And Richard Pearl is the guy that connected Thiel Karp to Poindexter, and they basically wanted to talk to Poindexter because they wanted to recreate Total Information Awareness and saw him as the godfather of modern mass surveillance. In doing so, they basically, Peter Thiel teams up with In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital firm. Alex Karp has said on record that the intended clients of Palantir from the beginning was the CIA. And the CIA was their first client for their first 6 years as a company. Their top developers went to Langley, Virginia, which is CIA headquarters, every 2 weeks to show the CIA their product and have them tweak it to their liking. And during that period of time, one of the top people at the CIA that would have been involved in that is this guy named Alan Wade, who was also intimately involved with Total Information Awareness. And if you look at how Total Information Awareness was described, its privacy protections, it's exactly the same as the way Palantir sold their stuff later on. There's an insane amount of overlap. And what's crazy here is that Alan Wade, a few years prior, had created a Homeland Security software program that was also pre-crime-esque and similar to what Palantir ended up doing. It was called Kiliad, and he teamed up with Christine Maxwell to do that.
I wonder what the Whitney Webb file in Palantir is like.
Sure, it's long.
It's got to know.
They probably know I have a mold allergy and all sorts of stuff.
And that I'm visiting you, having a conversation.
Well, I mean, that's their job, right?
Well, it's funny. So
it's about pre-crime. It's about predicting stuff before it happens. And that's what I think a lot of people miss about Palantir, because a lot of people say about mass surveillance, well, I have nothing to hide, but it's not about if you're doing something wrong now or not. It's about an algorithm thinking if you will do something wrong in the future.
I think I would definitely be on that algorithm. I think you would be as well.
Well, the problem is that pre-crime has been inching along, and actually a lot of people in Epstein world, I mean, obviously Peter Thiel and Epstein had a relationship. More came out about this earlier this year after, Thiel kind of tried to minimize his ties a few months earlier. But Peter Thiel's Founders Fund co-invested in this company with Epstein and Wexner and Ehud Barak called Carbine that basically had a pre-crime component to it. And Carbine has now colonized an insane amount of 911 emergency call services systems throughout the U.S. and are the main company at the forefront. If this legislation in the U.S. is passed, it's called Next Generation or NG 911, where they're going to basically federalize and centralize all 911 emergency call systems. And then when you centralize it, you can just put one company in charge. They've changed the board a lot since the Epstein scandal because Ehud Barak was the chair and there were people on the board that were tied to Epstein, including a woman that he allegedly took to the UK to sort of soften up some U.S. senators whose identity is still unknown before the Iraq war vote, but it's a story for another time. And, some other figures tied to Epstein were on the board, and it would formerly been created by veterans of Israeli intelligence. But now they only have one of the Israeli intelligence co-founders on the board. The others have left to do other things. One of them now works for Eric Prince, I believe. And, they've kind of gone their separate ways, and they've tried to rebrand as a more American-looking company, I guess. I think they added Trump's former head of DHS, Christy Nielsen, I think is her name, to the board, and they have Michael Chertoff, the former one of the early heads of DHS under Bush, is there.
So it's like so everything and everyone is captured. And everything is corrupt. Are they really good
I think that's kind of a simplification. I think not everything has always been like that. I think this particular group, once they got their hands on power, it's a faction. They've been consolidating control for a long time. And I think the advent of technology, big tech sort of taking over our lives, has really facilitated that. Because the whole conclusion to my book is that why would you take someone like Epstein down? You don't need people like him anymore to compromise people, because all of our lives are increasingly online. So if they want something on you, they can just harvest it off through, whether it's Palantir, it ends up in your Palantir database. Basically, it's sucked up by the NSA or GCHQ or any of these other agencies. And you're profiled based on it. Or if there isn't incriminating stuff, they can plant incriminating stuff on your devices.
So you're screwed either way.
If they want to screw you, sure. Yeah. And so it's much easier to consolidate power under those circumstances.
Do you think there are...
And they elevate people who are compromised to positions of power. How did a guy like Dennis Hastert become Speaker of the House of the United States when it was known that he was a pedophile years before getting to that position? Because they can hold it over his head the whole time.
Do you think there are a lot of Epsteins operated?
Well, yeah. My whole book is about how Epstein was not an anomaly. I mentioned the example of Adnan Khashoggi, but I mentioned Robert Keith Gray, who Robert Maxwell hired when he came, to the U.S. And made his big entry into New York City. He was also involved in blackmail stuff. There was a page boy scandal he was related to in the 1980s where, I forget the guy's name. I think Larry Craig was the name of the main congressman or senator involved. And Craig denied all the charges, but then got caught in the early 2000s for soliciting, sex in a bathroom in an airport or something like that. But there's been a ton of these scandals over the years. And then you have figures like Roy Cohn, who I mentioned earlier, involved in blackmail activities as well. There's a lot of these figures.
Sex blackmail seems to become very useful.
Well, it is, because, this is one of those things that's a holdover from the mob that later gets absorbed by intelligence agencies because they see its utility,
So if we see someone rich, famous,
knowing knowing information, the sexual blackmail information, the CIA, that's intelligence to them. We want to gather intelligence on these people and then use it to our benefit for national security interests.
Which is all economic.
Well, more often than not, but it's, it's obviously other things too. I think it depends on the circumstance, really.
It's so hard to get your head around it, Whitney.
Well, I've thought about, I understand that my books are like a lot of information, but the thing is, we're never going to get an affidavit from the CIA being like, yes, we did bad things. Like, we've known they've done bad things in various decades. It's been very documented, and they won't admit to bad things there in almost every one of those cases. So it's like, you're not going to get that about Epstein or about anybody else.
So why do you think Epstein became almost like the central figure for all of this corrupt global elite meta cartel?
Well, he's just a microcosm of it, really. But I think
is it his
he became too exposed, I think, especially after his first arrest. And as he described it, he became radioactive. But he had, before been able to move through all these different circles, with impunity, and was a well-respected guy in these elite circles, right? He was useful to a lot of people, mainly for money things, but also for, other more illegal things from what we know about the case as it's developed. So I think since then, I don't know, he tried to rebrand as like a tech entrepreneur and all this stuff, but he was allegedly still cultivating important relationships. He was reportedly advising Tesla on how to take Tesla private. He claimed to be advising Treasury on the Department of Treasury on cryptocurrency and anti-hacking efforts. All sorts of, he was still doing a lot of stuff between those arrests. It's just, the public association was, no longer beneficial for a lot of powerful people.
But he was considered financially illiterate.
By who?
Well, I think Eric Weinstein came out and said he's a moron.
Yeah, that's interesting. Doesn't he work for Teal Capital? Well, Eric, I'm not super familiar with Eric Weinstein's Epstein story, but as I understand it, he talks a lot more about his impressions of Epstein at the meeting as opposed to why he was going there. And I believe he ran a hedge fund at the time. So why would you be going to Epstein as a hedge fund guy? I don't know.
Well, it seems like everybody met with Epstein at one time.
Yeah, for financial stuff. But I do not believe that he was financially illiterate. He was very successful. He would not have been tapped in the 80s by people like Adnan Khashoggi and Douglas Leese if he was not savvy. He helped orchestrate one of the largest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history at Towers Financial, but his name got dropped from the case like 3 months in. So, I mean, how do you do that by being financially illiterate? Why would Leslie Wexner give you power of attorney over all of his affairs?
Well, that is also very weird, though.
But would he do that for someone who's financially illiterate? Because Epstein had several years between 1987 or 1985, depending on who you believe, when the introduction was made.
But why give it to him anyway?
Well, obviously, Wexner liked Epstein very much. I think there's no questions there. So there's this murder of Wexner's tax attorney.
Yeah.
And then not long after that, Epstein comes into Wexner's world and untangles his tangled finances, whatever that means. And Epstein during that time, before then, between 1981 and 1985, described himself as a financial bounty hunter. He was hired to find money that had been stolen, and he hid away stolen money for powerful people. He played both sides. And someone who can effectively do that, he was hired by like very fancy, like aristocratic people for those purposes, admittedly. Like a very aristocratic Spanish family being one of them. They would not just hire some financially illiterate idiot to do that kind of stuff for them. And Adnan Khashoggi was one of his clients too. He's not going to hire a financially illiterate guy to do that. I think that is, it's bull, and it's part of this narrative that's been woven about Epstein, about how he was just charismatic and him being good at anything else was just a facade.
So it's a distraction.
Well, yeah, because by that narrative inherently means don't look any deeper into what Epstein was doing, in his early history, for example. Alex Acosta, who was Secretary of Labor under Trump, arranged that when he was U.S. Attorney in Miami. He signed off on that because he was told to back off of Epstein because Epstein belonged to intelligence. So somehow Chomsky is completely ignorant of that, and I don't really know how that's possible. Carol reporting and Julie Brown and all of that was all about the sweetheart deal and how Epstein didn't really have time served. So what we're having are two parallel things going on. There's this push to digitalize everything. Yeah. To get all of the money, no more cash, it's all online. Yeah. The whole economy has to go online. Everyone has to go online for work and this and that. There's this push to make everything exist in the digital realm as part of the 4IR, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and all this stuff, right? And at the same time, we are having, on the flip side, a concerted push by governments around the world to completely control the digital realm. So the censorship stuff we were talking about earlier is part of that. But there's also these big efforts to end financial anonymity, to end just privacy online, have your internet activity or your social media accounts tied to a government issued ID, right? So if everything's online and you're not allowed to participate in the economy unless you're online, and that entire online environment is completely surveilled, including all your financial transactions, this is about an insane new surveillance paradigm. And I would say too, keep in mind, this isn't just about surveilling, what you do in the present moment or what you've done in the past. This is using all of that data from past and present, feeding it into AI and using it to predict if you'll engage in naughty behavior in the future.
Pre-crime, Minority Report. It's here.
Totally. So you don't even have to actually engage in anything the state says is bad anymore. They'll be like, this person might engage in something the state thinks is bad. The reason Epstein wanted to talk to Chomsky, by the way, was all about artificial intelligence. And Epstein had openly talked about this in an interview he gave in 2017, which the Wall Street Journal did not include. So just more indications that they left out a lot of information that could have given important context, including about like Ehud Barak example, another name that comes up in this Wall Street Journal stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they declined to mention that he spent the night at the apartments owned by Epstein's brother, where all these traffic girls were housed, and was seen there super frequently all of the time when he was visiting New York. Yeah. That's not Epstein's residence. That's where the traffic girls were housed.
Yeah, and this is the former prime minister of Israel.
Well, he's not just a former prime minister of Israel. He's also former head of Israeli military intelligence and a former defense minister of Israel as well. So, and he was head of Israeli military intelligence during the Iran-Contra affair. And when Robert Maxwell was doing the Promise software stuff for Israeli military intelligence. Ehud Barak probably met him before 2003, as he claims. Just like, Bill Gates claimed that he met Epstein in 2011 as bunk. It's hard to believe what these people say about the relationship with Epstein when there's, indicators that seem to point to an earlier meeting, right? So that's like the thing that really bothers me about like not just the revelations about the Chomsky meetings, but what Chomsky said about it. He was like, well, first of all, he goes, it's none of your business or anyone's. And then he's like, oh, and I met him and I knew him and met him occasionally. It's a weird response. Instead of
similar to
like,
Bill Gates.
No, it was even more like rude, I guess you would say, than Bill Gates, who had like a spokesman being like, oh, well, we met for dinner and this and that. He wasn't like, it's none of your business. I mean, that's a weird response.
Well, I'm thinking of the interview Bill Gates did like last year, the year before, where he was pressed on
he's
it
dead
on TV.
And it's
he's
fine.
dead now. It's fine. Like, you can wash your hands. He's dead.
Yeah, well, Chomsky, the thing that I wanted to mention is that he said, oh, well, I met with him because he served his time and per U.S. norms and laws, that yields a clean slate. And that, to say that means you're completely ignorant of the whole scandal that broke in 2019 about the sweetheart deal.
With Barr. Barr was included in this, right?
Well, so the sweetheart deal was before William Barr was Attorney General. Barr was Attorney General when Epstein died and was arrested the second time. But the sweetheart deal, right, the time served that Chomsky is referring to there is for his first arrest and sentencing, which was around 07-08, right? As part of that, there was this sweetheart deal that was arranged. And for people that remember, a few years back, Alex Acosta, who was Secretary of Labor under Trump, arranged that when he was U.S. Attorney in Miami.
That's what it was. Acosta.
And he said he signed off on that because he was told to back off of Epstein because Epstein belonged to intelligence. So somehow Chomsky is completely ignorant of that. And I don't really know how that's possible because all the scandal that came out with the Miami Herald reporting and Julie Brown and all of that was all about the sweetheart deal and how Epstein didn't really have time served. Right.
And then his lawyer was that Harvard professor. What's his name?
Alan Dershowitz.
Alan Dershowitz.
One of them. He had several defense lawyers who helped orchestrate the sweetheart deal. And right before he was due to be sentenced, Epstein went to tour military bases in Israel. How bizarre is that? Definitely what someone awaiting sentencing for sex trafficking would go do. I'm going to go to Israel and tour military bases before my sentencing hearing.
I'm going to go check in with my bosses at Mossad, and I'll be back in 2 years.
But he came back right away, and it was probably because he was very sure that there was going to be some sort of lenient sentence, and there was. Otherwise, I'm sure he would have stayed abroad, right?
Yeah. It's all so overt and out in the open. You think so?
But Chomsky's ignorant of that. By the way, one of his meetings was with Epstein and Ehud Barak. So.
And Woody Allen, when he was pressed on the Woody Allen stuff, he was like, "Hey, I had a great dinner with a great artist."
He's a great artist. Yeah, not a guy that abuses kids, the adopted daughters of his girlfriend and then marries one of them.
We're less than a month away from the debt ceiling. The government is essentially insolvent, is literally insolvent.
It's been insolvent, but now it's retardedly insolvent. Yeah. And they can't kick the can down the road anymore, and that's where the CBDC comes in.
Yeah, and
because that'll be a bait and switch.
That's what people need to internalize. There literally is no way to vote your way out of this insolvency. It is structurally insolvent. There's no saving it from within. You need to create these parallel systems.
Yeah, because essentially, through the petrodollar system, the dollar is a global reserve currency, which it's about to lose. That has sort of granted the American public with a sort of subsidy and insulation from the actual cost of things to an extent, right? That's going away. Yeah. And then you have this, and then you have this banking crisis stuff on the other side and all, the debt issue. Is money printed? Are we about to see helicopter money with the debts? I mean, how insane is this going to get? It's obviously not a pretty picture. And people really need to start seriously thinking about what this means because shit's getting real. And the people that have led us here are creating a new system so they don't have pitchforks at their door in a year's time. There's a major effort to totally destroy today's young people. And it really shouldn't be surprising when you consider, all the revelations, right, about just how messed up Hollywood is, the elite circles are, and how they control our media, our education system, and all sorts of stuff. So over time, they're obviously all those things are going to have a major impact on young people. And I think the smartphone is a big part of that because you're allowing kids to sort of access these worlds and their parents have no idea what's going on there and what's happening and don't know. Right.
Yeah. What was it? The game Roblox it's like a popular children's game and they thought they were playing with other kids, but they were really playing with adults who are grooming them and parents are completely unaware. Yeah.
So, that's part of it. But, even away from games like that, I'll just give an example. So my ex had an older son who, when we lived together, he was probably like 8 or 9. And at his school, there were kids with their own phones. This is here in Chile, right? And they were just at recess, just looking at like really intense, sadistic porn.
Ugh.
And so like you think about when we were kids and like guys, that age are like, ooh, I want to look at and they pick up like Maxim or Playboy and they like hide it under their mattress and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So these kids with no like, parental, no need to hide anything because it's all on a phone and they can access more of it than ever, right? Super fast and basically constantly stimulate themselves with this content that they, in previous eras didn't have access to.
Yeah. And especially at that age when the brain's still forming, like what kind of long lasting effects does that have? And then when you,
and it's going to impact how they view intimacy later on in life, how they view relationships, how they view women. And there's a flip side to that too, with how all this type of technology affects women and girls. So again, I think a lot of people, well, here, let me circle this back to stuff we were talking about earlier. Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, is subpoenaed as part of a major sex trafficking investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and JP Morgan Chase. No one's talked about that. Google, what controls YouTube, controls search, controls the Android operating system on smartphones. Okay. That's nuts. Why is there no coverage of that? But there is coverage of, Noam Chomsky and some of these other names that have come out that are newer.
And I'm not sure if you caught this story a few years ago, but going back to like Google Android team, there was like the higher ups at the Android team were running like a slave operation that became public.
Wow. No, I didn't know that, but I can't really say I'm surprised. And then at the same time, Google is pushing for a lot of this transhumanist stuff too. You have people like Ray Kurzweil, who in the metaverse wants to be a promiscuous woman named like Rosie or something. By the way,
go look it up.
It's real. Go look it up. It's real. Are the people sort of that have planned a lot of Google's future trajectory. And then you have Regina Dugan, who used to be in charge of Google's advanced projects team and also the equivalent of that at Facebook, and has now been tapped by the Wellcome Trust, sort of the British equivalent of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to basically create transhumanist toddlers. Yeah. And no one cares at Wellcome Leap. She's a former director of DARPA, by the way.
It's a very small circle. Very small circle.
It's creepy. Well, again, DARPA and the military have been a long-standing driver of artificial intelligence research going back to its inception, in the 50s and 60s and stuff. Yeah. And what did they want it for? Oh, and then again, another one of these guys that's been subpoenaed along with Sergey Brin that's not getting any coverage is this guy named Mike Orvitz, who's a former president of the Walt Disney Company, right? And when he was president of Walt Disney, the guy in charge of the Imagineering department was this guy named Brand Farron. And at the same time, he was in that role at Disney. Brand Farron was also advising military and intelligence in the United States. He was like on the Army Science Board, involved with a lot of really weird stuff. And he brought to the Imagineering department Danny Hillis and Marvin Minsky, who before that had run this supercomputer firm super closely tied to DARPA called Thinking Machines, that wanted to create an artificial general intelligence. And at that point, Minsky and Hillis were very tied up with Epstein.
They have Google.
What are all these guys doing there at Disney?
Right. And like these are, like you mentioned, with Google, particularly YouTube, Android, search, own that. Disney, obviously the most popular media company focused on children's entertainment. Like what are they seeding through these avenues?
And I mean, think about the people that run these Hollywood studios. Like this morning, there was this clip circulating by this child actor, Matthew Lawrence, and he was saying, yeah, so my agency fired me because my agency sent me to the hotel room of a prominent Oscar-winning director who asked me to take my clothes off so he could take Polaroids of me and told me to do X, Y, and Z, presumably sexual activities. And if he did so, he'd be the next Marvel superhero.
I saw that clip. Extremely creepy.
Yeah. And he said he said he didn't do it. And then his agency fired him. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now I'm really wondering about all these actors that are Marvel superheroes now.
Well, one of them's great. Like, wasn't that Ezra Klein guy? Like, literally, didn't he murder somebody or something like that up in New York?
Oh, did he? I don't know. I've never even seen a single Avenger movie, so I don't know.
That's the other thing. Sorry. Like, for all these defectors in Hollywood, I saw that clip too. I wish you would have named the name. Like, why can't they?
Well, he might be concerned, and I probably wouldn't blame him. Yeah, but keep in mind too, all those Marvel movies have major contracts with the military, like Iron Man. I mean, this is all I mean,
there was it's
public record.
Propaganda against China and stuff like that, or
well, not just that, but like there's like contracts signed between the Marvel movies and the military. I would argue that's how Elon Musk got all those cameos in Iron Man and why they modeled Tony Stark after him, because he was a military contractor at the time. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, this is how we make people think that Elon Musk is a real life superhero. So when he takes over Twitter and makes a brain chip, people will be like, yeehaw. Tony Stark. I love that guy.
You think the Marvel movies are a form of propaganda to light nudge people to like normalize the weaponry?
Yeah, I would suspect so. I haven't really paid attention to their plot lines and stuff, but why would the military be so interested in having contracts so that they could unduly influence the direction of those films and what's showcased and the plot lines and all of that?
Yeah. It's also creepy.